Okay, we're going to have a look at a pretty straightforward area of economics. Taxation, and what we call it the incidence of a tax. We're looking to see how taxes are passed on to consumers. So here I've got a market, which is relatively elastic demand curve, Q and P. When you're writing this exam, obviously you'd write price, supply, demand and quantity. But just because it's a bit harder for me to write on the screen that I'm writing on, I'm just going to keep it as the initials, okay? And the first market we've got here is this red market here, and that is a good which is price elastic, and the second one is this green market here, which we'd say is more price inelastic, and you can notice that by the curves. Now what I'm going to do now is I'm going to add a tax to both diagrams, which is a new green line, okay, S1. Okay, so the original price is P1, and at P1 Q1 is consumed, and it's the same in both markets, same equilibrium. Now we have an increase in the price. Why do we have an increase in price? Well, because a tax is being placed on supply, thus reducing supply, therefore increasing the product's price. If that doesn't make sense, you need to have a look at your supply notes again, which creates us with a new price in both markets of P2. Now I'm going to concentrate on the next few minutes on our good, which is more elastic, the red arrowed market. Now the difference between supply 1 and supply 2, these two curves here, is the amount of the tax which is being added. Okay. Now we notice in this market, which is more price elastic, this red amount here, this is what we call the incidence of the tax. This is the amount which the firm passes on to consumers, the amount that consumers have to pay of the tax. The bottom bit, the green bit, which I'm highlighting now, well, this is the bit that firms pay of the tax. Okay, some bit is passed on to consumers and some bit is paid by the firm. The difference between the P2 and P3 is the tax levy per unit. Now, in a good which is price elastic, we'd expect to see only a small amount of a tax being passed on to consumers. Why? Well, that's because the fact that because of the good is one that is not a necessity, because the good is one where people don't have to buy it, maybe has lots and lots of competitors, that the firm will not want to pass the tax on, because they know if they pass the tax on, it means there's a fall in people who buy the good. Let's have a look at the green market. Now again here, we have a good which is more price inelastic. Again here, we have the red shading, and we notice straight away that this red shading is actually larger than before. Difference between the two. And what we can see here is the amount that's passed on to consumers is higher than the amount having to be paid for by producers. Why? Well, this is because this is a good which is price inelastic. It's a necessity. For some reason, it's something which consumers will pay high prices for, and therefore the firm will pass on this high price to the consumer rather than paying it itself, and therefore it pays a smaller proportion of the tax and passes on a large amount to the consumer. What's quite interesting here, and what's quite hard to see in my diagram, but is quite interesting, is about this area here, which I'm just colouring in now. This area here shows the difference in the quantity. You see, in a good which is price elastic, as soon as the price increases, consumers stop paying for it. They think, oh, it's not worth it. So the amount actually sold falls by quite a large amount. See here, Q2 to Q1 minus Q2. Whereas on the other diagram, this blue amount here, the fall is a lot smaller. Why? Well, because it's a necessity, consumers have to pay for it, and even though the price has risen, they decide they need to pay. So obviously our first market, our red market, might be something like chocolate, where it's got lots of substitutes, biscuits, crisps, cakes. On our second market, the green market, maybe something like tobacco or alcohol, where it's a necessity, or people need to have it maybe because of its addictive qualities. Now, if you were the government and you had to tax a particular good, which would you choose? Well, common economic theory is that you would choose a good which is price inelastic for a number of reasons. Firstly, you're less likely to reduce employment in that particular sector. We can see that because the fall from Q1 to Q2, seen at the bottom, is only small. because people are still having to buy the good, and therefore a tax placed on the good is not going to reduce employment. But also, because of the fact that you know how much you're going to take in of tax is going to remain quite high, it provides certainty for your tax revenue. So for the government, it allows it to adequately predict and forecast its tax revenue, so it can therefore decide which merit goods and which public goods it wishes to spend its money on. So the key roundup of this is, because of the difference in the elasticities, it changes the amount of the incidence of the tax, or the amount of the tax which is passed on to consumers. In goods which are price elastic, only a small amount is passed on. They can't pass on large amounts, because if they did, that firms would see that consumers would not buy their product. Whereas here, where the goods is price inelastic, they can pass on high taxes to the consumer, because the consumer will still carry on buying the goods.